repeat the non-conformist oath. I promise to be different. I promise to be unique. I promise not to repeat things other people say.
Welcome back to Positive Blatherings, and I hope you had a fantastic holiday. This is going to be posting just as we creep up on 2023, and it's been one hell of a year. And I like to reflect on the year of podcasts, and of course, we do a lot of podcasts here at RockVox. My podcast is one of the ones that kind of gets left to when I actually have time, but I've been fortunate enough to at least do a handful of really, really cool conversations here at the studio. And what better way to top off this year than to have Ryan Dacko in studio, because Ryan is the author of the Book of Quint, and he is also the guy who started the Jaws Obsession podcast. And I am fanboying out right now, my friend, let me tell you. And because this is the year that I discovered the Jaws Obsession podcast, how perfect is it to end the year with our conversation? You actually came to the studio. I was lucky enough to ask you right when you had time.
Yes.
Because you're a freakishly busy person.
Yes.
And I still don't understand how you do have the crap that you do. But I really want to start with the story that I have about what happened, how I discovered your podcast, which is really because of your sister, Tiffany, who I've been friends with for a long time. And I always have these just random posts about Jaws all the time. Like I'll post a line or something. And every time Tiffany will chime in, you got to listen to my brother's podcast. And you just started in 2021? Is that when you started the podcast?
December 2021.
Okay,
yeah,
so 7th, so a year ago. Oh, yeah. December 7th. Nice touch.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that, and actually that wasn't planned. That was just the day.
See?
But see how everything works out like that. That's this whole story. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to be on your show, because that book would not be possible, I believe, without your help.
Oh.
Serious, because there was a crucial moment there. I know we'll probably get to this a little bit later, but when you allowed RockVox, you used your recording studio to do chapter 16 and 17 with the audio version with my brother-in-law, Rick and Tiffany. And I believe that was at a crucial point where the Benchley IPLLC was reviewing the manuscript.
Oh, so it kind of gave it that extra level of professionalism and seriousness.
I was really stretching out, trying to show the potential of what this book could be. And when they're reading the manuscript, which they had the first draft. They had something like this.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, they had something like this, but they only had like half of it.
That's going to be in a museum one day.
Well, that's the thing. It's like I brought this to show you some of the work. Well, we could talk about this later about what the evolutions of the novel. But they had only half of this, and there was so long because I didn't hear anything from them. And at that point, we were talking in about when was it, about August? Of this year, and we were doing, we came into contact with each other, and I said, listen, I really could use some help, because to bring a third party in and to record chapter 16 and 17, to have like an audio book version of it all was the I think that when it's all years from now, they're going to boil that down. That was a very definitive moment, because the book became real at that point, where even if you're reading it as they were reviewing the manuscript, I have to believe, and I have not really concrete verified this yet, but I have to believe that they would have reviewed that, and if they listened to that episode, the book became alive, and you were a part of that. And I'm honored. And it was shortly after that, we get the permission to publish.
Yeah. I mean, I reached out to you through email because I was so damn jazzed about your podcast. Because just going back, I mean, I'm a filmmaker. I've made a couple of short films. We produced a feature last year or the year before or whenever. What year is it? 2022. and so, you know, I like to call myself a filmmaker. I think I'm just over the line where I can call myself a filmmaker.
Okay.
And so when I get to talking with movies people, that, you know, it's the standard, oh, you're a filmmaker? What's your favorite movie? That's like the standard question.
Yeah.
And without hesitation, I always say Jaws. And most people go, really? Like, you know, they were waiting for me to come up with a Fellini movie or like, you know, a Francois Truffaut or something, you know, like, you know, and I'm like, yeah, but you can't scoff at that because Jaws is, and you played in your podcast, you played the clip from Quentin Tarantino where he said it's not the best film, but it's the best movie as movies are, what it is, what it delivers, and all that kind of stuff. And so
he sees it. Everyone sees it. There's so many filmmakers, Steven Soderbergh. There's so many filmmakers out there that cite Jaws as their favorite movie, or at least the influential movie that got them into filmmaking.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's the greatest movie of all time. I have this mathematical computation. I do everything with like math, especially with even making coffee. I make coffee with a calculator, and everything is got to be math. It has to hit those certain columns, and that's why I was kind of complaining that I over extracted my coffee this morning as I was coming in. I was like, oh, I ruined it, you know. And it's just every morning for me it's trying to get that perfect coffee to water ratio, 1 to 21, 1 gram of coffee to 21 milliliters of water. So if I have 36 grams of coffee, multiply times 21. So everything is math. And if you look at Jaws as math, there's columns. There's at least 3 different columns. I think you could go to 5. I don't really have notes on this, but if you look at broad spectrum, does the movie, the popularity of it, does it span generational boundaries? Does it go through time? Does it hold up as like, you know, sometimes you see a movie as a kid and you're like, oh, that's great. Then you watch it 30 years later.
It sucks.
Right? So then you have box office appeal. Does that generate crowds of people going to see it over many years? You know, there's all these different columns.
And the IMAX release just now kind of proved that, right?
Yep, exactly. And then you look at quality of film. Is it made well? Well, you have Steven Spielberg, using some techniques that were unbelievable, and and they might have been unintentional going in because the shark had problems.
Right.
So they go to but we all know those stories. But the thing is the quality of filmmaking, box office appeal, and then spanning generational and societal boundaries. It goes to other countries. What Fellini movie does that? What Woody Allen movie does that?
Right.
You don't have that. So that's why you have to say, when I say Jaws is the greatest movie of all time, I mean it, and it can be proven mathematically.
You know, this reminds me of, do you remember, do you remember, now I can't, Dead Poets Society.
Dead Poets Society.
The J. Evans Pritchard scale.
Oh, love it. Love it.
That's right up your alley.
Rip it right out.
But see, that's the thing. It's like, and this is what amazes me, is that you are an insanely creative and inventive person, and yet you're very much the opposite of that with your math and the way you're applying. Like, I don't understand that way of doing things.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I understand it, but it doesn't. I can't do that. You know what I mean? Like, I am completely opposite. I am as unmath as you could be.
Well, that's the thing. There's a formula. I don't like the formulas. I don't really like seeing screenplay books or when they discuss stuff about formulas. But it's a fact of life that we have to get used to, is that everything is a formula. And when people open a novel or when people go to a movie, they're expecting somewhat of a structure.
Right.
And if you can apply your creativity within that structure and maybe even create some new structures, people really, they latch on to that. They go, okay, let's see where this can lead me. So that's where I was amazed at. I mean, we could get into this now with the novel, is that was my first novel. I came from a screenwriting background, so it was always about formulas. Can you hit those 6 beats, all that screenwriter's Bible and all that stuff. And I recently did a podcast with Jaws where I said the Jaws secret, where I believe Jaws is 2 sets of 6 beats.
Right, you had 12 beats, so
12
total.
Beats. So my theory with that novel is, can I have 18 beats? 3 parts of 6 beats. So you have 3 roller coaster rides, and do those roller coaster rides intersect. So as you're coming down of one, you're coming up on another one. And that should engage the reader. So that my theory with that novel is to make it those beats from usual screenwritings to bring it into that. But what I never expected with writing is that was my first novel, and I believe now writing in books is the superior form of storytelling entertainment, in that I was allowed to do stuff that you can't do with a screenplay. And that just brought so much more enjoyment and creativity out, that the story became much more than I expected. And that was from the process. So I started out with a process, and I did not outline this. It's not like I had a clipboard.
That was my next question.
Yeah, I didn't do it. I didn't do it like that. It was all in my head.
Now, do you typically, when you're writing a screenplay, do you outline first? Or do you just stream of consciousness?
If I'm doing a screenplay, it's very mathematical. There's definitely an outline. And you have to hit those 6 beats, the rising action, fall, point of no return, climax, all that stuff. So you have those. And then you start working through there, and you start playing with times in your head. You're going, and that's what I didn't like about the screenwriting, was I was constantly worried about audience boredom. So I'm thinking about pacing. And I'm going, I would love to.
Did I lose him? Did I lose him?
I would love to know more here. Or then I'm thinking about, is the producer reading this? And is the producer going to say, this is too verbose, I don't like the screenplay? But I would love to talk about what this person's thinking right here. I can't show it in the movie, but I would love to do that. And that's where the novel was really it was the best of everything. And now I understand. And what I do believe is that this latent writing that I've had inside me, that was from, I was writing screenplays 22 years ago when I was in the Coast Guard. And the whole thing was, that was the big popular thing back in the 90s and early 2000s, was the screenplays, Robert Rodriguez, all that stuff. And I think there's a lot of people writing screenplays that if they wrote the novel of that screenplay, they would actually see just what would come out. The writers that are out there that are latently being held back because they're in that formula phase.
But in the box.
But if you apply that box to a novel and see where that takes you,
it's a bigger box.
It's a bigger box.
Yeah.
But some writers don't have that formula of the screen, so they don't have that pacing in mind. So they will tend to write very verbose, and it will just go out of hand, and it will become, it will lose the reader.
Yeah.
And so that's what my whole thing was. The pressure was immense. I'm still kind of amazed that we're sitting here and the book is right here in front of us.
Oh, yeah.
Because
I mean, it's when I got this book, actually Rick handed it to me. We were doing a shoot, and he's like, I got a present for you. He left it in my car. And I saw it, and I'm like, and I opened it, and I'm like, I don't want to minimize what you've done, but this is legit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to imply that I never thought it was legit.
No, thank you.
But it's just like, it's a hardcover.
Yeah. I went above and beyond. I went beyond.
You really did.
Yeah.
And so I'm on page 247.
Okay.
And I wanted to I have some passages that I found while I was reading last night.
Sweet.
That really I thought was a great example of your style and your incredible descriptions. So, and I unfortunately I don't remember where this was. I didn't take a picture of the page number.
It's okay. That's okay. I might know it because I've been to this book 8 times.
I hope you know it. Okay. All around laid the carcasses of dead vessels, decaying skeletons of metal leaking their rusty, burnt, umber-colored blood into the sea. As far as you could see, boats abandoned by fishermen and merchants from decades ago. Memories and lives scuttled and resting as corpses in their tombs. Some boats sat in the water and stared back out at sea, longing for the days of their youth. Others had decayed and rolled to their side, broken and tossed from their moorings by hurricane-delivered high seas. On the beach, a maze of wooden vessels dragged to high ground and left for dead in various states of rotting decay. And so, so this is when
I don't remember writing that.
It's when you were in the zone.
I was in the zone, yeah.
So this is, and I'm not going to give any spoilers out or anything like that, but this is basically when they're about to do the Orca. They're about to get the Orca together.
Yeah.
And I really think it was genius how you did this part of the book from Herschel Salvatore's point of view, because for those of you, unless you're a complete Jaws fanatic, you're like, who? Do you remember the dude that was walking around with the dog in Jaws, and he was like Quint's little buddy? Yeah. That's this guy. Yeah. And I think that was just great, because that was like, you see this throwaway character almost.
Yes.
And your throwaway character becomes the narrator. It's
right.
But when I read that passage, I was just like, that is the perfect example, and I think encapsulates how you describe things in this book. It's the perfect combination of poetry and realism in my mind. And I'm in no way I'm not a critic of any kind, or but I know when something's good when I read it. I know I recognize it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And so that was just like, that was just awesome. And I really, really wanted to get through the book before I saw you today.
No, this is good. This is like a halftime. You're almost like you're a little bit past halfway.
Half, yeah.
So this is kind of nice. It's like a halftime. We'll do this, and then I'll come back when you finish, and we'll do a final one. But that example, that right there is, I never had the opportunity to write like that because of screenplays.
Exactly.
So if you're going cut to exterior, shipyard or Graveyard Cove.
Yeah.
You only have one or two sentences, and then you got to get on with it.
Yeah, and it's up to the director. To make that come alive, but it's not in the text. That has to be part of the vision.
Part of the vision, and I can't communicate that. And I believe that that's where a lot of writers, if you lock into that screenplay, what it should be is novel, then screenplay.
Yeah.
Believe me, I have notes. I could make that novel into a screenplay.
Sure, you can.
But what writers, you're holding yourself back, and I was for years. I never allowed myself to write because of the screenplay box. And if you read, and I remember some of the best compliments I had were people in the past were going, they would read, if you get lucky enough to get someone to read your screenplay, because no one really reads screenplays, but if you are lucky enough, they would say, wow, Ryan, this is a really good description of this car chase. That's written really well. And then that always sat with me and said I had something I could write. So the confidence was there when I decided, when I had this strange feeling that I had to write this novel. Wow, the pressure. Right, but I had the confidence. The pressure was that the whole world is going to be watching.
So besides the fact that I'm a fan and I love all the stuff you're doing, the real reason why I had you on the Blathering is because you are the perfect example of someone who gets things done. You have a goal, and holy shit, dude! And this is how Tiffany described you too.
Yeah.
Like almost to a point of OCD.
Yeah.
Where you go after, I mean, she didn't say that, but this is my interpretation.
Sure.
Of when you get something in your head that you want to do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not real familiar with it, but didn't you walk across the country or something?
Ran across, yeah.
You ran across the country.
Yeah. 23.4 miles a day, 134 days, 3,143 miles. And that was to get a movie deal, try to get a 3-movie over a 5-year business plan in Syracuse, New York. And that was, that's what I did, because it was one of those things where this was back in the MySpace days. And I said, let's make a national spectacle. And it was a big thing to try to get 15 minutes of a producer's time. Mm-hmm. And someone that was serious about making movies, someone that had capital to make movies, because that's my time in the film industry. There's a lot of people like to talk about making movies, but then when it says, let's do it, they're nowhere to be found.
Yep.
And like you said, let's do it. I have this, I have the business plan, we have everything. We have the locations, we have this, I have the screenplay, let's go. I have the storyboards, nothing. So my whole thing was, how can I find someone serious? So it's like, that was pretty much my idea of, let's make a national spectacle. And by the time I get to Denver, I'll start running. And by the time I get to Denver, we'll make it public we'll do the whole thing on MySpace, and then we'll make it public, and then we'll have all the followers of the run email the producer, and then the producer will say, so he'll know that I'm coming for a 15-minute meeting and to pitch this 3-movie 5-year plan by the time I get to Hollywood. And And that was the whole aspect of that was, how do you get a meeting? How do you get someone's attention? So at that point, my whole point was to get to the meeting. And then it would be, it's not about what the movie's about. The movie, I believe, is going to be quality. It's about, hey, let's go see that movie, or let's go rent that movie by that guy that ran across America to make. So now you have a sellable story that's behind the whole thing. And that's what that was my plan. That was back in 2006. So I ended up leaving, I think I left in August, and I ended up coming in right on New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve 2007 was when I got from Clint Eastwood's handprints. So it was Eastwood Theater in East Syracuse to Clint Eastwood's handprints on Hollywood Boulevard, 3,143 miles. Yeah.
So
It's a documentary about it.
So there's a documentary?
The long story short is I didn't get the meeting. Said producer found out about it from the media earlier, so he really didn't believe I was. He thought it was like a charlatan, So it's all right. You could think that, but I kept running, and when I was all said and done, I didn't have a meeting, but I had 37 hours of footage. Even when I was running by myself, I had a support vehicle that would go with me. So I would run 3 miles to the support vehicle, get a drink of water, and they would drive up, and I would go there. And then I would say, okay, let's do 3, let's do 2. But when I didn't have a support van driver, I ran by myself. I ran over all of Missouri and half of Kansas by myself with a jogging stroller, with my laptop and all that stuff. And so I would set the camera down, and I'd hit record. I'd run by it, and I'd walk back, and I'd pick the camera up.
Did you have a stroller for your balls?
Pretty much.
Jesus, man.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. It's like you have to adapt and overcome when you're put into those situations. That's something that they drummed into you in boot camp.
Yeah, I'm like Heartbreak Ridge, dude.
Yeah. And so I was left with 36 hours of footage of me running, and I just said, you know what? I was just right there, so I just said, I just plugged in my editing my editing platform, and I just said, well, let's just be honest. Let's tell the whole story. I go, because I'm not going to do the whole. I consider everyone that's already made something a filmmaker. I don't like the term aspiring filmmaker. I hate that, and I never like.
Fair.
Because if you made a movie, you've already done it. You don't have to be aspiring. And then that was my big thing was at what point do you become a filmmaker? Like you just said, no, you're a filmmaker. You're a screenwriter. You wrote a screenplay. You're a screenwriter. You might not be the most experienced of screenwriters, but you've done it.
Yeah.
So you've done it. So, and that's my whole thing. So I just told that story, and it ended up going to Plan 9 from Syracuse is the name of the documentary. It ended up going to win Best Director and Best Documentary at New Haven Film Festival. It got 5 stars on Film Threat, and then it got picked up by Netflix, and they were renting it for a while with mail-out DVDs. But when they went to streaming, then those rights went. So I still have the movie, but
well, I want to see it. And
I'll get you a DVD.
By the way, that's an incredible story,
okay.
And it's I'm one of those people who I've gone through that too, where we go. There's all the talking.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna make a movie. We're gonna make a movie.
Yeah.
In this town, in Rochester, I know Syracuse has really gotten a lot of filmmaking.
I made my
business.
first movie out of Rochester. I had an office on East Ave.
Did you?
Yeah, and that's where we made the first feature film. I actually shot on 16mm film back in 2002, and we did a hybrid project between Syracuse and Rochester, but we used Rochester actors, and that's one of the 5 screenplays I wrote in the military that I had a producer that I was working with, and he was also a military guy, and we came out and we put our money together to do that first movie. And that was, so Rochester there is a lot more going on in Rochester in terms of filmmaking and acting and all that stuff like that. But you're right, it's a lot of talk. And
it's a lot of talk.
And if you get out to Hollywood, it's 1,000 times more.
It's more. Because there's 50 times the people doing the same thing.
Yes.
My buddy and I, Steve Miller, who's my partner here at Rockvox, we met on the set of a short film that somebody was making. I was the first AD and he was doing sound.
Okay.
And we just got to talking and we became friends. And it turned out we had a lot of the similar likes and similar attitudes. And we joke around and say that we share the same brain. But we're like, at this point, we were both in our mid-40s.
Yeah.
And early to mid 40s, and we're like, we have to make a movie before we turn 50.
Okay.
we have to make a movie because it's going to be too late. And we're going to be 70 going, I should have made a movie. And then we're going to hate everybody that did it. So,
Right.
But that's the same kind of thing. It's like we just did it. And
Just do
we
it.
were hooked up with people who kept talking and kept talking. And finally we shook them loose because I was like, no, we're doing this.
Right.
And we did it. And we didn't even raise money like we thought we would.
Okay.
He ended up it's like taking out a loan or whatever, but it was like we still did it, you know, and that is.
And look
That
how
is
much
huge.
you learned. I bet you learned so much from going in. So now, if you were to do a second one, you would be that much more experienced and grown as a filmmaker that you would now go, I know what not to do. And now the experience grows. And that's what my big thing was in the younger days with my problems with film schools. And it's almost like you're prolonging that talking part. And you should just go out and do it.
It's all meetings.
Yeah, it's all meetings, and it's like they're just making one feature film from the screenwriting to the blocking to the working with the actors and the sets and all that, and then the editing, and then the promotion. It's pretty much a doctorate in film. You're there. That's a lot of experience in one shot. Now, if you made 2 or 3, I don't care if it didn't go to Netflix. I don't care. That's a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point, is that what I was trying to get people to do, that's when my first book, and it's not really, I've self-published that, but that was called the DVD Film School. And that was what I was writing out of Rochester, was my experiences while in the independent film world. Is what were the biggest thing was like, what does James Cameron, Alfred Hitchcock, and Peter Jackson all have in common? They never went to film school. And that's the whole thing, is that these filmmakers find their, like water seeks its own level. Filmmakers will find their own way. You just have to start working. You got to do it. And that was the whole point of what I was trying to get people to do, was the DVD Film School was, you don't have to go to film school with $50 in a Blockbuster card at the time. I actually had the whole list, a whole syllabus, 2 semesters of watch a DVD and you learn the art of John Frankenheimer, how he made a car chase scene on the set of Ronin and how he filmed that and how he blocked it from himself. So you're hearing from John Frankenheimer. You're not hearing from some film professor at the University of Rochester. You're hearing from John Frankenheimer. Why wouldn't you want to take that advice and apply that if you're going to go do a car chase scene? Or and I had this whole thing about editing and all that. I mean, you can go even to like Robert Rodriguez's his commentary is unbelievable for El Mariachi. And after you get through all that, then ask yourself, do you really need film school? So my pitch was to parents. Your son, your daughter wants to go to film school. Read this book. Have them read this book. Have them go through this. And then they'll ask themselves, do they still want to go to film school, or can they take $16,000 and go make a movie?
Right.
And that was what I was doing. I was selling those books on eBay. I sold out, but I never really, and I tried to get them published, but you always hear the publishing, oh, we've heard that before, or that thing's been done before. I said, yeah, but I don't see it anywhere.
And what year was this?
That was in 2002, between 2002 and 2005.
So a buddy of mine did the same thing.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Indie Film Hustle?
No.
Okay. No. Well, I'll tell you about it later.
But it's
But he
out
did
there.
the same. He did a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the idea is 100% correct.
Yes.
Because I don't know how many times I've seen on message boards and different groups where they're talking about, where they're going back and forth about whether or not film school is worth it. Look at Kevin Smith. He dropped out of film school and took his money and made Clerks.
Yes. It's a different era, right? We that was a different era, right?
Yeah,
because that was the 90s, right?
yeah.
But the theory still holds.
Yeah.
And that's what this novel is it's proving, that even no matter what field you're in, the theory still holds that if you go in an artistic environment, if you go out and you just do it in a proper order, and if you actually research and ask people, if you don't know, go ask. That was one of the big things. I had a film camera. I had a 16 millimeter Aeroflex, and I'm looking at this thing, and I've never even loaded film on a camera before.
You went and bought a film camera?
Yes, yeah. My producer and I, we went down to New York City and bought one from one of the film schools down there. So we have this. It was the same one that Robert Rodriguez used in El Mariachi, and so I had this. I go, I don't even know. I have a light meter. I have theory, I have books, but I don't, and And so my sister goes, Tiffany, she goes, here's the directory of cinematographers for Rochester. So I looked up and I got the name Ron Vidor, who was a camera operator on the set of Jaws. And this was back in 2002. I ended up just calling and I said, hello, sir. How you doing? My name's Ryan Dacko. I'm in my office here and I have this film camera here and I've never shot it before and the shoot starts 3 days from now. And I have a lot of questions. You have some time? He said, wow. He goes, yeah, I have time. Let's go. And he sat on the phone with me for an hour. And I just went down this whole list. I go, if I tape myself up in a janitor's closet and I tape the seams up, can that be a de facto darkroom? He said, yes. I go, okay, so if I learn to do this with my eyes closed and load the film, I don't really need to transport this to a darkroom. I can just be in a janitor closet of a high school. Yes, that should work. He goes, make sure you put tape the seams up on your film magazine and all that. And he was giving me all this, and I'm writing it all down. And therefore, I use that, and now I get through that first weekend of filming, and I get the daily. I go to Toronto. I sleep in my car, get it exposed, then go to Post Central, get it dropped onto DV, come back to my Rochester apartment studio. There, bam, put it on. Oh look, everything came out. I guess I did good. So we do it again the next weekend, and that's the process. Ron Vidor. I hope I get to meet him someday because I will thank him. But you see how Jaws?
Oh, was he not in town or
he wasn't? He was in L.A.
Oh, yeah. Wow! But the guy. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
but he was probably like, wow, how honored he was that you called him.
Yes,
because he's not a household name.
No, and it was an apprentice. It was like I was coming from that Coast Guard service mentality that you have a chief.
Yeah.
He's done this before. You're new. Ask what he's done. Like, how should I do this? And the best question to ask is, what would you do differently?
Yeah.
And then you learn that, and you just keep going. And there was so many examples of that. But I remember the pressure of going, I know this film camera should work. I know if I turn the dial to 48 frames per second, I get slow motion. I know if I go 24 frames. But does it... will this theory, I needed it to ping off someone. I needed a sounding board. And Ron was that guy. And he probably doesn't remember me or the phone conversation, but one of these days I will get him on the Jaws obsession.
I have to ask you, would you consider yourself fearless?
No.
Because from my point of view, you seem like a fearless person. Like there are just in the short time that we've been talking this morning, well, all right, 40 minutes. Holy crap.
Let's go. 3 hours.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's make this a two-parter.
We'll do it. In just this short time, you have mentioned things that you've done that I thought to myself, holy crap, I would have been too scared to do that.
Right. Okay.
Running across the country?
Yes.
Out in the middle of nowhere?
In the middle of nowhere, right.
That's why I was saying, you must have had your balls on a freaking, like, now, so Fear and I have this incredible relationship. It's love-hate relationship.
Sure.
I can't get rid of fear. Fear is always there. I try to beat fear, but fear stays. One of the things I did to try to beat my fear of heights was I did the 21 Stories for Scouts.
Okay.
And I rappelled down the first Federal Plaza building.
Yep.
Did it twice, and I did it once off the Kodak building. Each time was the most terrifying moment of my life. And when I was done, I was like, I want to do it again.
That's my next question. Yeah.
I'm thinking about it. My palms are sweating.
Okay. All right. But this is my fear of failure. That's the
well, yeah.
That scares me more.
Besides the fear of death in that situation, my fear of failure is huge, and because of my fear of failure, and I wrestle with that imposter syndrome all the time.
Yeah.
How do you beat that? How do you decide that you're gonna go down and buy a film camera and make a movie without knowing how to do it?
Well, that's the whole thing. Is that for the 2 years prior to that, by reading Rebel Without a Crew with Robert Rodriguez, or you're reading all these different film theory books, and you've seen I was in Antarctica with all these books, and I'm writing screenplays with because I was on an icebreaker out of the Coast Guard, and it's just you see all this happening in the outside world, and you say, well, I can do that too, but but you have to realize it's like when they say hit the ground running, you say, I imagine myself. Michael Jordan always said he would always take all these foul shots. He would do shooting practice after his practice was over. He was always the last guy, so there would always be a special coach that would keep the gym open just for Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan was quoted as saying, because he believed that there was someone out there practicing harder than he was, and he did not want to get beat by this mythical player that he had in his mind. So I imagine this evil twin Ryan that was out there working harder than me. And I did not want to fail because my movie was going to go up against his at the film festival. Or I was going to, there was always this thing like, this guy's working harder than me. And I was so mad, or I would get this fear of him beating me. And I would go, what can I do now that he's not doing? And that's where the Run Across America comes from. Or it was this other person it wasn't really there. It was just that they were working harder than me. And it was like, no, one more mile, Ryan, one more mile. Get 34. Why didn't you do 35?
Where does this come from? How far back does this part of your character?
Wow. I'd have to. Thank you for that question. I don't think everyone has ever asked that. It has to come from my father, and then my grandfather, because I watched that. My grandparents, and my dad were they're Ukrainian immigrants, and they came over here with my Aunt Maria in 1963. There's a lot of stories about the struggle to come over here. And then my grandfather, who was a farmer, and so was my father, came over here as a teenager. And then he worked his way up working on power lines, and he raised 5 kids. And I did not want to fail that progression. That's what it was. It was, how can I do something that's fulfilling in an artistic sense? Because from my mom's side, I get the artist. My mom is Irish and Scotch Irish, and so we have her mom was a painter, and so there's an artist side that's there as well. But there's a practical, hardworking farmer side, and I did not want to fail that progression, and that's the whole thing. It was like, no, you're going to be. Every generation has to step up. That's how it was working in my family. And so the fear of failure was, no, you can make this happen. You can express yourself, but you can also try to work as hard as you can and not fail. And that was what the fear was. It didn't matter. It was like, no, I don't want to be told no for an answer. If I get told no, then I have to go to the next person. But then, okay, fine. What can I do so it makes someone impossible to say no? You just go and do it, and you just say, I'm going to do it, and I don't care what happens. And that the novel was the first time in my life that I said, I don't care about the money. I have a good career. I work on power lines. I have a great family. I have a wonderful wife. And I said, I'm not worried about it. It's just something I need to do, and I'm just going to do it. And that's what I was communicating to the Benchley family was that I was asking their permission for something that's already being done. I wasn't saying, can I start?
Right.
It's going to be done. And here's how I go. It was in May. Here's 195 pages. This is half of it. I'm still writing. It's going to be done in October. And I wasn't going to stop.
You're the king of goal setting in my mind.
Thank you. Wow.
I really have, you're my new hero. And that's not hyperbole either.
Thank you.
It's true because, and hopefully other people will listen to this and watch this and get that same feeling and learn something, because how you conduct yourself with your goals and how you focus on it. And I mean, it's a masterclass. It really is. Like I said about your podcast.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
Podcast, yeah.
You know, your podcast is not perfect from a production point of view. I can hear the edits.
Sure.
But it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter. And there's times where I hear podcasts and I'm like, oh God, oh God.
Yeah.
I'll hear the edit and it doesn't faze me at all, because I want to know what you're going to say next.
The content trumps the quality, right?
Totally.
Yes,
And don't get me wrong, the quality is good. It doesn't sound like crap or anything like that.
No, yeah.
It's a well-produced podcast. You have you check all the boxes for making a good podcast, for making a really, relatable and interesting podcast. That it's like a perfect example of you because you just decide you're going to do something and you jump in and you do the research, you read about it, you learn from other people, but you just do it. And you don't let that internal doubt ever creep up and stop you from going forward.
No. In fact, I still shake when I play the intro to Jaws Obsession. I still have a little trembling hand because I know the weight of what's happening. And I sit there and I go,
and it's awesome.
Well, thank you. I do like it. I start pumping my fist and all that. But
when I first heard that, I was like, "Oh, this is the real deal. This was the coolest intro I've ever heard." But
that's what I was trying to show is that before I even started that podcast, before I even launched hit publish on December 7th of 2021. There was so much pre-production work going into that. I worked with Carl Casey, who's a musician out of Vancouver. And I said, listen, we would go back and forth. He would send me sketches, and I would say, listen, I needed to do this, and then go into something more unsolved mysteries, And then I put the dialogue lines in. And I was fully expecting to get canceled. I was expecting the censors to come in and say, you can't do this. So that's why I told you about this before, I created the Telegram channel, and I created all these backups. We have a Discord server, but we really don't need. But that was going to be, no, this show is going to happen. And they could throw me off of Apple. They could throw me off of Spotify.
But I'm doing it.
It's going to be there.
Yeah.
And if people want to hear it, they're going to hear it because that's what this is going to be. And that's where I was coming from with just the podcast alone. I don't think there's a writing teacher around or professor who would say, if you're planning to write a novel, start a podcast. Because it is unbelievable amount of work. It is unbelievable. It takes 6 to 10 hours an episode for me.
Is it weekly or
what, weekly?
Weekly.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I tried to. I hit 49 episodes in 52 weeks, 53 weeks. Yeah.
But that's huge.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I try to impress upon my clients and people that come here is that consistency is one of the big factors of having a podcast. You need to be there. You need to be doing your show. If you're going to do it weekly, it's got to be weekly.
Yep.
There could be some times here and there, but it has to be. People need to come to rely on it.
Yes.
Hopefully,
yes.
If it's a good enough podcast.
Yes. And that's the thing is that I knew the podcast was so important, and this is probably where this to me, it was I saw this Jaws community, and I was so upset that as Jaws fans, we did not have that avenue. There was not an avenue for discussion or some deep introspective in the movie. There's a lot of talk about the lore of making of Jaws. A lot of people talk about the making of Jaws. So if you'd have a minute-by-minute podcast, which has been done before. But has anyone gone into the movie itself? Because there are Star Wars, there's Star Trek, there's everything, there's Harry Potter, but no one was doing Jaws. And I said, wait a second. I was there in June of 2020, sold out drive-in theater in Cape Cod, 500 cars, and I said, what is bringing all this? Jaws has played a major influence in my life everywhere I've gone, from deep sea diving to underwater welding to the United States Coast Guard. Everywhere I've gone, all the way through, it's always been I meet people like yourself. Jaws is my favorite movie. I can't say everywhere I went someone said The Godfather is their favorite movie or Citizen Kane is their favorite movie. But these movies are considered the high and maybe the superior to Jaws.
Right.
So what is it that Jaws triggers? And that's why I said there's something there that's unanswered. There's something there that's not in the movie Jaws, but we all know it's there. It's another story. And that's why we come back, because we want to know what's going on in Quint's head when he's looking around and his orca is sinking and he's about to lose his entire world. What is that look? What's going on behind his eyes? We want to know that. And that's when I get this. I still get goosebumps when I think about it, because I go, that was this big thing. I said, I have to go to Martha's Vineyard. I have to go out there. I've never been there. And I said, just do it. Just go out there. So left the kids with my parents, went out to Martha's Vineyard, and that's when it started.
See, now that's the other part of this, which you mentioned briefly, but to have a wife and a family that will support you in your crazy dealings, in your crazy obsessions.
Yeah.
And I mean that with love and respect, of course.
Yeah.
That's key.
Yeah.
Because I know that hasn't always been my experience. Not lately. So not to get too far in the weeds about my own relationship, but married 20 years this year.
Congratulations.
And, Thank you. And it's the past 5 years that have really been a new awakening for us as a couple.
Okay.
We did everything backwards as a couple.
Right.
And so having that support from your spouse, really that whole part of it can make or break everything that you do. From my point of view, that's how it is. If I wanted to do this studio and she said no, this studio would not have happened.
Right. Right.
Because I definitely wasn't about to like say, well, screw you, I'm going to do it and leave me. You know, like,
right.
How many people are willing to make that kind of a leap?
Right.
Well, thankfully it didn't come to that, but you know what I mean?
But there's a responsibility that you probably navigated that. It's not that you were going to disappear for 5 years. You were going to still be a supporter yourself, and you were still going to do that part, but you were going to do this on the side, but it wasn't going to, that's the whole thing. There's this common ground that you have to find, but there's this tightrope. Everything is a tightrope in the world, and you have to walk that. That's like the novel. Everything was a tightrope, and it's like if too heavy on this side, I'm not going to get permission from the Benchleys. Too heavy on this side, and it's just I'm going to lose the listener or the reader or and it's just so when you do stuff with these projects, and that's the way I saw it with this novel. I turned to my wife first thing. I said I got to write this book. And she said, well, you're going to have to, if you feel strong enough to do it, you're going to have to do it. But I knew the weight of what I had to do. It was in there. I didn't really have it lined out yet, but I knew that this was going to consume my life, and it was going to be painful. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do it. That was the thing. I didn't want to do it. I really didn't. There was many nights before I even started. I said, what are you doing, Ryan? Stop. You want to just go watch Bering Sea Gold. Go watch Curse of Oak Island, and then go back to work and just get And then I said, no, this has to be done because another fear is fear of regret. I didn't want to be lying in bed, like brilliant Braveheart line. You're lying in bed, 50 years from now, all these years from now, and you're asking yourself, what would you have done? Would you have rather have done this? Yes, I did not want to be 50 years from now saying I should have done this. Right. And that was my biggest thing. 2025 is coming up, and I knew with the way corporate Hollywood works, and hopefully I'm not burning any bridges, but I didn't want to see them screw up the Jaws franchise any more than they already did. So that was part of it. It was all there. It was just protection. It was protecting our favorite movie. That's what this book is. It's protection.
I love that. That's perfect because how many times I keep worrying that one day there's going to be the Jaws reboot.
Yeah.
With Ryan Gosling as Quint or some bullshit.
So all the characters, it would be some and
it's all
deep blue
CGI crap
CGI,
too. Yeah.
Hybrid sharks with like this smart. It was just no. Jaws is there's a story there,
but this, on the other hand, a prequel in the Jaws world.
Yeah.
The movie world, not the book world.
Yes.
I do want to know how you conduct your day.
Okay.
How do you divide your time? How you have to be an insanely disciplined person. Yeah. And based on how you measure your coffee, I believe that's true.
Yeah.
Walk me through a typical day while you're in the midst of a big project like this.
Okay. Well, it's remember I said before, you can't neglect that other side. So I do work as a high voltage power lineman. So I work on a emergency dispatch truck, and I work nights. So I work from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. and any overtime will go into noon-ish, those hours. So those hours are for work. And but when there is a lull in calls, or when there is a spot where there's really maybe I'm waiting for waiting for the authorities to come on. We had a pole get broken, car wreck, and there's a lot of waiting. Sometimes there's a lot of that's just pretty much what it is. There's a lot of work, and then there's a lot of waiting to start your work.
Yeah.
In that time, do you have a notepad there? Can you write down some stuff? Do you have maximize your time? And that's the whole thing is you're blending. You're not dividing, you're blending things. And if you can find ways to blend things, I've learned that when I used to keep a notepad in my shirt pocket all the time. And by doing that, then you could hit the ground running once you get home. I got to get that sleep, get that 3 hours of sleep in.
3 hours?
Yes.
Is that your typical amount of sleep?
On my days off, it's five or six. on my work days, it's about 3-4. Yeah, and so within 4 or 5 days of work, I will only do 3-4 hours of sleep.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's
And you can function fine like that?
massive vitamin supplements.
Really?
Yes. In fact, Richard, my brother-in-law, Rick, he was seeing me yesterday at Christmas, and he goes, "There sure is a lot of pills there." and I go, "Oh, it's all vitamins." I was trying to show him what the vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin D3, magnesium, all that stuff like that. And that to me is because you are denying yourself the proper nutrients and all this stuff. Believe me, I will get sleep when stuff subsides. But for the last 2 years, that's just pretty much how it's been. It's been Monday, Tuesday were my days off. Like I'm here on a Monday now. These are my days off. So this would be my writing day. When I was writing, I would do 12, 13 hours of writing. I would lock myself in my basement and I would just stay down there until you get this done and go. And there was a lot of pressure, which is what I needed, because you need to put yourself in a pressure box. And if you put yourself in the pressure box, if you tell the world that you're going to have this book done, if you tell Wendy Benchley, if this book's going to be done in October, that book better be done.
Right.
I promised her that, and I promised the Benchley IPLLC that. And this last summer, I lost 20 pounds. And there was a lot of stuff, because, personal life dramas and all that stuff come in too. You still have to navigate bill paying and all that stuff. So all that's coming in, and you're trying to navigate all that. And then as you're navigating that, you just find yourself, you're not eating, you're not doing this, you're stressed. I did a last episode 49 was I got no spit. And we analyzed why Hooper had no spit for his dive mask, because he had the sympathetic nervous system was taking over. His parasympathetic nervous system was shutting down. So he had his salivary glands were shutting down because he was stressed. And that's what happens in high fight or flight stressful situations. And that's what I was like this whole summer. And it was kind of like my heart still beats thinking about it, because I was like, get this done. And then once it was done, it was, you got to work with a formatter, find a formatter. And it was but all these little pieces were coming into play. It was forward motion is everything. In fact, I just mentioned that to someone, that they were saying about a shark, and that a shark constantly swims. It's constantly going forward. And if you think about it, that's a beautiful, beautiful analogy, is that if you have forward motion every day, if you just make a little bit forward motion, you're going to get to where you're going. Just don't have any days where you go backwards or you just stay stagnant. And eventually get the project done. So that's what my day would have been: work, get your 2-3 hours, get your 4 hours, and then write. You got to get that out, get it out of your head. And then I would write a little bit, go back to work. I would try to get a workout in. I'd try to run or do some weights. And then eventually this last couple of months, I had to take the workout out because I had no time, especially with the shipping of the books. So that's how it works, is the 40 hours plus overtime is the time that you have for that. And then you compartmentalize. You don't deny yourself that, because that's what pays the bills. That's what keeps the family going. Now, everybody else, no TV. I didn't even watch TV. I haven't watched movies.
So this is, you're kind of already answering my next question, which was, besides sleep, what are your chief sacrifices? Because there's always got to be a sacrifice.
Always got to be. It was media.
So it was
all media.
Watching TV or any of the. So, all right. So you work out. That's a great way to get rid of stress and to keep yourself on track. Is watching movies, watching TV, is that your sort of main source of enjoyment for pastimes and for relaxation?
Not anymore. Now it's reading.
Now it's reading?
Yeah. Now it's reading, because before it was, now it's this opened up a door, and that I've never realized that now when I read, I just want to read so much. I know that my time on this planet is so limited, and there's so many things out there to put to. It's amazing that reading, because the prep work I did for this book, 14 months of research, reading all these books. I read Moby Dick by Herman Melville, reread a bunch of Hemingway. I did. I had all these different 8 books on the USS Indianapolis alone, and it was just researching the authors and the survivors and all this stuff. It opened up a door, saying that there's so much of this. I want to do more, and I just don't have enough time. So now it's like, well, what do you eliminate? And then that's why you eliminate the reality series and stuff that I really want to know that. I want to know what's going on there too. But I've noticed that those are also edited to distract. Yeah. And that's one of the things I tell my 16-year-old son. I say that life is that's what all this world is distractions. And they did that for a reason, because they don't want you getting ahead. Those are the distractions there, because people like distractions. Some people need distractions, and I like distractions. But if you allow that to stop you from setting goals, and if you eliminate those distractions, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. The Tucker, the Man in His Dream, Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
Love that movie. There's one line in that
tiger.
There's one line. Yes, there's one line in that where he says he says there's 24 hours in it every day. Now, who here says we can't do it? Now, that line was when I saw that as a kid, I said, it's right. There's 24 hours in every day. So if you tell me, Ryan, you got to do an eighth revision on the Book of Quint and you got 4 days. Well, that's 96 hours. Okay, we can do it. I just have to, 4 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep. Okay, yeah, I take a day of vacation. I look at all those hours I have. I can do it. And I did it. And that's the whole thing, is that you have to realize how much time you do have, and then you maximize that time out. So my day is complete. To answer your question, my day is completely different depending on the project that I'm doing. Yeah. Got to pivot, bob and weave.
But so what's your focus right now? What are you focused on?
Well, we shipped the books out, and now my focus is about getting this into major publication. We have to find a literary agent. And there's a whole nother mountain to navigate now. Now the pressure is on. You think about it now, but I have confidence in the book. That's what I'm saying, is that now the book is I can actually hand this to someone and say, here's the book. It's not an idea. I'm not writing a book. This is not a manuscript spiral bound. Here's the book. And I was really was focused on the presentation of this story, okay? Because this is a character we've all grown up with. There's a lot of people watching that are going to look at this, and they're going to have a critical eye, and they're going to expect the best. And this is something I believe Robert Shaw himself would smile if he was handed this book. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that would do the character justice, the performance by Robert Shaw justice. And I believe that we're here at this point. So now it's about getting it into the right hand who is going to say, we need to bring this to the world.
Now, how do you work? The biggest problem that I know about in filmmaking and representation and stuff like that is that the unsolicited, you can't just send it to someone because they don't accept unsolicited things.
Correct.
So how are you doing that? What's your strategy?
So I have been watching, there's a couple YouTube channels that I've been watching, and there's really great authors that are on YouTube that they have their own series where they talk about the trials and tribulations of the publishing world. And so my whole thing is, when I don't know the answer, I go right to people that do. And now I've been soaking that up. And what I've been learning is it's the querying process, they call it, where you actually have a letter.
Right, a query letter, yeah.
A query letter that explains your project in one thing. They say you're supposed to be like an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
You got to be able to get your book idea out in an elevator ride. Well, I can do it before the doors open. It's a prequel to Jaws. Okay? And then so that's the whole thing, is if I get that query letter, and now I have to target certain agents that have, how should I say this, that maybe represent authors in a similar genre, historical fiction.
Right.
And then I query those agents and try to get a response. And that's where we're at now, because now the publishing world is notoriously slow. And I'm trying to stress that to people that they write me daily trying to get the book. We only made 300 of these, and we're down to the wire. So now it's going to be 6 to 9 months. At the publishing world, if a publishing house were to take this book today, it would be 6 to 9 months until you see that on Amazon,
right?
Because they have to do their whole own process, their editing, the dust jacket design, then their marketing strategies, all that stuff has to happen. So I look forward to passing this off and then letting someone else have the stress test,
right?
Because I have other things I want to work on too. Yeah, so
well,
yeah.
I tell you what, I'm interested. Whatever the next thing is, include me. I don't care. I'll help in any way I can.
You got it.
Because you're like, just to be on your team is huge.
Oh, you're part of it.
Well, I appreciate that.
Well, that's one of my things, is going to the publisher. One of the prerequisites is they have to give us a small budget, and we have to get Ian Shaw in here. And he's going to do the audiobook. We're going to do the audiobook. And I'm not going to leave anything up to chance. That's one thing I've noticed, is you don't leave this up to chance. I want to be involved in this process. And with your help, we're going to make the audiobook something that the Jaws world has never seen before. Because the experience of reading it's good. Wait till you see the experience of what we could do with an audiobook of this. It could be really amazing. So I think a publisher would really be interested in that.
Yeah. The problem with publishers when they get into the audiobooks is that they have their peeps, you know. So he lives in England, right?
Yes.
Ian Shaw?
Yeah. But I always said, if you just go do it yourself. And if I have to, do it yourself. It's just you do it yourself until they say, oh, all right, fine. Let them do it. You know, you say, listen, this is what we're going to do.
Just to shut him up.
Yes. You just say,
Squeaky wheel.
But you don't have to be a super. I don't think it's out of the stretch. I think that they should like an author to say, all right, look at how he's passionate. He wants to do the audiobook.
Right.
He wants to have a hand in directing that audiobook.
Right.
And he's got a studio already lined up. Why not? You know?
Yeah.
And I would hope that they would see that. And that's what I'm trying to show. That
Try to take all the thought out of it.
Sure.
And say, look, he's done all the work already. Look at
it's there. It's
yes.
It's a silver platter. You know, so that's the pressure that I'm under now is the query letter process, querying, getting that right, and then. But I've had some phone calls, and I'm hoping that the future looks very bright. That near future,
very cool.
Because I'm stressing that the 2025 is the 50th anniversary of Jaws, and we are on the Peter Benchley timeline.
Right.
I keep saying this. I drum this on the Jaws Obsession all the time, that he was finishing up the manuscript in 1972, 73. He would be finished. It would take a whole year for them for Doubleday to publish to 1974 was when Jaws was published. But he was finished in January 73. And we have the world's fanciest finished manuscript right here, right? Self-published. But it's going to be right before 2023, 50 years later, how everything comes full circle. It's a beautiful story. I love it. And I believe that was all part of it. Just the energies that are working around it and all this stuff that's making this happen is that this was all for this time. And if you look at it, this is perfect because 2025 is the 50th anniversary. If Universal and Mr. Spielberg would want to even look at this and consider it for a feature film, there's time. It's beautiful. That's where we're at. Thank you for reading, by the way, for the one half.
Absolutely.
I love when people.
I have another.
Are interested in. I guess that's what every writer. I will never take that for granted, and I just want because writers. There's people that write for 20, 30 years, and they hope for that one book or that one story where people are just passionate about it, and right out of the gate, there's passion behind this by all over the world. And I am so thankful for that. I really am.
I really hope that either Spielberg or somebody has an open enough mind to take this seriously. And the optics of it, there's no reason why they shouldn't.
Okay.
Because, like I said, it's legit. I mean, look at this. Look at this cover. I mean, even that, the iconic Quint out on the pulpit. I mean, geez.
I did that myself, by the way.
Did you?
Yeah, it took about 13, 14 hours in my basement. And then I used the font that my technical advisor, John Tedder, he created this Orca font, he's unbelievable. And I never would have met him without the podcast. All these little pieces of the puzzle were needed. But he created this Orca font by hand using just ORCA. He created a whole alphabet and number system.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yes. And I said, John, is there any way, could I please use this in the Book of Quint? And he said, absolutely. So he let me have this font.
So you drew this?
I took the still frame. And I took all the parts, I cleaned it up and all that, and I put that in there with the font. And I actually made the bars, the rebar to blend into the letters, the tops of the letters.
Yeah.
And then I did there, and then that was it. That was the logo that we were going with. And it was the branding. You know, there's
that's the thing.
Right?
It's like you definitely got the branding down.
Yeah. I purposely didn't want to do any names on the covers.
Book number 29 out of 50.
Look at that. And that's from the first three boxes off the line. I made sure that box 1, 2, and 3 were those 50 autographs that people, campaign backers, paid the higher tier for. And I was really animate about that. I said, here's box 1, 2, and 3. These came off the line first. Okay, boom. I went to the bottom of the box. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's how fanatical I was about that.
When I got to episode 20.
Okay.
All right. So if you have not listen to the Jaws obsession, first of all, what the hell are you waiting for? jawsob.com, right? And it's available wherever you get your podcast. So Ryan takes the first 19 episodes to kind of build us up to this great reveal. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, after I listened to episode 20, I remember this. I was walking my dog because that's when I listened to your podcast, when I would take the dog for a walk. And when you made that announcement, I was like, holy shit, that is the best freaking idea I've ever heard in my life. Like, I swear, I was like, this is such a great idea. And knowing what I know about you and knowing your history and all of these projects that you've done, I have to say that there is no doubt in my mind that one way or another, this is going to happen. Like, as a movie with Ian Shaw, the whole thing. Sure. I see that. I can totally see that.
See it too, right?
Yeah. And it's not one of those things where I'm like, well,
yeah,
good luck, pal.
Right.
Like, I believe you could do it.
It's there.
Without a doubt.
It all starts with a book. Remember that. That's how the world shifted. We're in a different era. Before, in the 90s, you could get a screenplay like Pulp Fiction would get greenlit, and there you go.
Yeah.
You get budget for it. Now we're in a different era where they want a built-in audience. The financiers want a built-in audience, and they also want something that the audience is already familiar with. And okay, everybody's familiar with Jaws. And now, if you have a book, it all starts with a book, just like Jaws. All started with a book, and then once the people are familiar with the book, all the dominoes fall. It's just that's all it is. This is the part right here. This was the part, and that's why I was just like, no, I'm not going to do this as a screenplay. We're going to do this as a novel. And then that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. Was the novel writing opened a door that I never expected to open, where things were coming in from my experiences. And I have really quick. I don't know how much time we have.
Whatever.
I have Blathering, right? I have a Ernest Hemingway on writing.
Okay.
Good writing is true writing. If a man is making a story up, it will be true in proportion to the amount of knowledge of life that he has and how conscientious he is, so that when he makes something up, it is as it would truly be. So he's saying that you're only going to be as true of a writer as the amount of experiences that you have in life. And as we live longer, we become better writers just on the basis of living your life.
Yeah.
Paying those bills every month.
Yeah.
Mortgage, stress. Your marriage of 20 years, that's a story, but there's an experiences there that you can draw on. And that's the thing, is that what I realized was, as I'm writing, I know what direction the story's supposed to go in, but some of the stuff that came out was coming from places, when you read that passage, I can't remember writing. I just knew I was in that moment, and I was describing what's coming in, and that door's open. So my sister Tiffany calls it a flow state. She says that you're in the flow because I was describing her the other day. That door never really closes. And I still wake up at night. Still can't sleep because I get all these thoughts of Jaws characters and stuff like that. And so there's more coming in. And that's why the novel was the best decision I ever made, because it made me find an enjoyment in all things about reading, about respecting other books that were made already, the process that these authors have to go through to get a book on that shelf. So now I look at a bookshelf at Barnes & Noble, and it's 1,000 other stories. I'm just one of those stories. It's amazing. It really is. And so that's my biggest takeaway from this whole project so far, is that the book is here, and now we're going to start more. We're going to build on that.
So how would you, someone says, what's your book about?
What's the book about?
Like, I know we've talked about it. It's a prequel, but what's your pitch on the story?
Okay. Well, it's not only is it the prequel to Jaws, but it is the story of a man who survived one of the greatest military tragedies of all time, and how he copes with the stress of not just the post-traumatic stress disorder of not just surviving that, of not just experiencing that tragedy, but the guilt of surviving, and the fear of failing like he failed to help his friends in the water on those 5 days. So how does he cope with that? He goes to a little island back east called Amity, and he becomes a shark hunter. There's a lot of other sub-narratives that are going on and subtext, but that is the gist of it, is this, here's a man, his greatest fear is a fear of failure. And that's where the book is coming from. And it's this, his whole life has been a series of setbacks. And when you learn this about Quint, the performance by Robert Shaw in Jaws is amazingly heartbreaking.
Uh-huh.
And I watch Jaws now as I have watched Jaws in this light. And I'm hoping that when people read the book of Quint, they will watch Jaws in the same light. And they're going to see this and they're going to go, I never knew it. Yeah. I never knew this. Why does he flip out on Hooper? We know why he flips out on Hooper after you read this book. Yeah. And why is he laying on that throttle, that orca so hard? Because there's this fear of failure, and he is not going to fail. It's unbelievable. I get.
It has emotional. So many commonalities with what we're going through in life today.
Yeah.
With the PTSD,
yeah.
And I picked up on a lot of those where I guess I could say, if I can't say this, we'll cut it out. Where he's got all the barrels of water, like he's hoarding water.
Absolutely, you can say that,
and it makes sense when you read his what happened to him for the Indianapolis, being in the water, why he would and this. And you've heard tales about people that went through the Depression who were hoarding food and POWs that were hoarding food and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So when you see what he's doing, and then would you also say that it's sort of a tale of vengeance too?
Yeah.
Because that's his whole thing. It's like with the tiger shark.
Yeah. The revenge is his way of him thinking that's almost like the drug that makes him forget about the past.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. Everyone he kills, every set of jaws that he hangs is that little bit of revenge. And as the story goes, he's now surrounded by all these shark jaws, but he still feels guilty.
Yeah.
And it's still there. And he says to Herschel, time doesn't heal. It only makes it worse. And that's the gist of the story. Is one of the things is I have to write someone back. They wrote me an email, and they were saying it's some questions about why did I take the character in these directions and stuff. And one of the things one of the tightropes I had to walk was I did not want to minimize Jaws. Jaws is the greatest movie of all time. You have that shark is the biggest shark Quint ever saw. So how do you create an interesting narrative prequel without trying to overdo, because a lot of stories now try to overdo, the sequel tries to overdo the first one. They try to make it bigger and flashier. And if you have a prequel and you try to make it bigger and flashier,
it doesn't make sense.
It's kind of like what the problem with Star Wars happened, is they kind of overdid, instead of kept it small. Keep it small, it will be better, because now Star Wars seems big. And that's where I want Jaws to still seem big and intimidating and overpowering in what's going on in Jaws. So that's where this is showing, it's building it up to that. And that's what this whole thing was about, was making people re-enjoy or re-watch Jaws. Even people that have never seen Jaws, I've talked to people that are going to read this book, that bought the book that never saw Jaws. So they're going to read this and they're going to watch it.
Those people exist?
Yes, they do. A lot more than you'd think. And I said, I want to hear from you more than anyone. I said, make sure you write me an email.
Yeah.
Let me know what you think when you rewatch this, when you watch Jaws after you read this book. So that's what it's all about. How Universal Studios in 2025, how much more of a celebration of this greatest movie of all time that you've had in your catalog, and you've done umpteen reissues. How much more of a celebration was to give us backstory and weight and context to make this movie better, and you don't even have to touch the movie.
Yeah, and really, the Quint is the character that we didn't know. I mean, nobody had any clue as to how deep Quint was, and like his whole backstory is, he talks about the Indianapolis and stuff, and it's it's an intense scene, and you get a little peek into who he is, but there's so much more there.
Yes.
And now I know every time I watch Jaws now, I pick up the things after listening to the podcast.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to finishing this so I can watch it again.
Yeah, but like you said, that's the limit of filmmaking. There's limitations. There's only so much you can tell.
Right.
We can't see what's going on in his mind. We can only hear about his story of Herbie Robinson in 2 or 3 lines because that's filmmaking. And that's commercial filmmaking, unfortunately, but that's that's the genius of, I always said that was the hardest form of artistic expression is can you have your vision put in a commercial setting? That's why filmmaking is so hard. It's so difficult. 2.5 hours. You get 2 hours. That's all you get, right? But with a novel, now I can actually explore that and go into that. And so as he's finding Herbie Robinson, he's remembering the times that he was with Herbie. And that's the stuff. And now that brings it closer. It paints a more realistic picture because I felt that the younger generations and the people I talked to were seeing Jaws as a cartoon. And they were cartoon characters. And they looked at Quint like a Captain Ahab cartoon.
Right.
There's not. There's more than just the Indianapolis for motivation of killing sharks. There's a lot more going on. And that's what this book explains.
And what's funny? I wish I could find this comment when I was posting about. It was when I posted about the book. It got quite a few shares, by the way. There's a buzz. There's a buzz about this book.
It's building. It's building
on the Book of Faith. There was someone who mentioned that she's never seen Jaws, and this is someone who's maybe slightly older than me. And so I'll be 50 in February. So she says, movies that I will never watch, even if they are acclaimed. Jaws, The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, any and all scary slasher movies, The Exorcist, Chainsaw Massacre, It. You get it. I have enough horrifying nightmares already, and I'm a huge chicken. So now here's someone who totally doesn't get what the movie is and has categorized it improperly.
Yep.
Like it's a slasher movie.
Yeah. And that was the fault of that. That was where the backlash to the sharks came from, was they made it into a monster shark movie. And I say this over and over again on the Jaws obsession, that Jaws is a human movie with a monster shark in the background.
Yeah.
Tying all those humans together. It's not the other way around. And the sequels went, Monster Shark does this. How are we going to kill Monster Shark? How are characters going to respond to Monster Shark? No, you should have stayed with human, and just had the sharks tie them in. And what I would stress to someone, and remember, we also in the 80s, we would always go to the video stores and we'd look at where was Jaws? Jaws was always over there inside the horror, scary section.
Yep.
Right? And it's not fair. It was just like, no, there's so much going on there. I'm watching a guy have a moment with his son with the mimic of the movements at a dinner table. That's not Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right.
That's not Nightmare on Elm Street. That goes over here in like the drama section. That's why it's PG. So my stress, I would talk to the lady, say, listen, excuse me, ma'am, it's PG. And you've probably watched Braveheart.
Right.
I don't see you terrified over a guy with a battle axe through his skull. So I think that you will indulge in the humanity of Jaws if you give the movie a chance. And that's what I would. It was just the marketing, and that's what we're changing that now.
Yeah.
And that's what I tried to stress with director Steven Spielberg. He recently had a comment that was picked up in all the news outlets about he apologizes to the shark population and about the killing of sharks post-Jaws and what Jaws did. And also Mr. Peter Benchley was very, very, he was always remorseful about what happened. And he lived the rest of his life trying for shark research and conservation. And we are all sorry about what happened. That was terrible. But let's look at the events. What built up to the reaction is 200 years of human-shark relationships were always that scary movie, scary stuff. You look at 1932 movie Tiger Shark with Edward G. Robinson. The sharks are brutally treated in that, and they're tearing guys' legs off and all that stuff like that. So it wasn't just Jaws. Jaws was just the biggest movie to come along and do it, but there was more still going on. And then if you look at how did we respond as a society consuming Jaws media after Jaws? Meg, killing bunches of bathing swimsuits and bathers. You have
Deep Blue Sea.
Deep Blue Sea, The Shallows, a maniacal, psychotic great white stalking. That doesn't happen, but we still go to the movies and see it.
Jaws 4.
Jaws 4. Don't get me started. Don't get me started. But the thing is that dare I say, Mr. Spielberg, this book is the most accurate portrayal of sharks ever committed. And if you were to put into it examines the human-shark relationship. Sharks are aggressive predators in feeding frenzy situations. This book explains that. I dedicate whole chapters and passages to explaining that aspect. If you were to make the movie Book of Quint, you are now doing a redemption arc for the movie Jaws. So Jaws can go on as Jaws, but now we're explaining of why is that shark so aggressive in Jaws. It's explained in this book.
Right.
There's subplot elements that are going into there. So if you were to make this, if you really truly wanted to apologize to the shark population, make the Book of Quint. Because then you just cleared Jaws' name.
Perfect.
How about that?
Well, as much as I'd like to continue talking, we probably should wrap up because we're working on 90 minutes. But
we're going to do this again after you finish, right?
Oh, absolutely. I can't say enough about this experience that. And coming from me being a World War II buff and interested in all that kind of history and stuff, the Indianapolis chapters were really fantastic. That whole, how much research went into that? Did you get survivor accounts and all that kind of stuff? It seems like it was probably one of the most accurate things that was ever written. Narratively,
I spent the most time on Indianapolis. I read 8 different books. There's one book called Only 316 Survived, and it goes through. They gave all the survivors. They contacted all their families, and this was a while back. So when there were still some that were still alive, and they asked them for a letter. Just describing anything they wanted to say. They was like give them an open forum. Yeah. And some of these families came back. That what I thought was really amazing was some of the daughters and granddaughters and grandsons or sons wrote back and said, "My father's dead now, but this is what happened after the sinking." And those were amazing. That's what I built Quint out of. His story is just a combination of all these different things. There was a guy that would make sure his kids always had a drink of water before bed. He would always ask them, "You can have anything you want to drink." And the lady says that my father, we were the luckiest kids in the neighborhood. My father always made sure we could have anything to drink we wanted. Yeah. Because he had there was that dying of thirst. He watched his friends die from thirst. And I thought that was, those are the little things that are left untold when you watch a documentary, it's the aftermath of it all. And that's really what Jaws is. It's that aftermath of a man who's gone through this great disaster. And I'm hoping that as we wrap up, that what people will take away from this, it's post-traumatic stress disorders. I'm not a professional, but you don't have to go through battle to go into them. Some people just sitting in traffic for 60 minutes a day for 20 years.
I have PTSD from my first professional job in video production.
Let's hear about that.
I worked for Carnival Cruise Lines.
Okay.
Out of Miami, and my boss was a super workaholic. His wife worked for the cruise line as well. Okay. And they both started out as shipboard employees, which, as you know what it's like on a ship. Yeah. Right? You work at home. Like, you're living where you work. So there's no separation, or it's very difficult.
Close quarters.
Yeah. So he wanted to grow our little department. Our little video department started as doing wedding videos and editing wedding videos, and he had aspirations of making this department a big corporate department, a corporate media department.
Okay.
And so in order to do that, we had to go over and above all the time. We had to over deliver.
Right.
We had to like over promise and over deliver, which was really difficult. So
Pressure cooker situation.
yeah. So there were many times where, I became the main person. I became the main editor. I became the main videographer. I became the main director. I was everything.
Okay.
I even did the damn voiceovers.
Right.
So the whole project had to be done by me. I had no help, and I had like ridiculous deadlines, unrealistic deadlines. And there were times where, so we would do crossings they would build the new ship in either Italy or Helsinki, Finland. And then we would take the ship across the Atlantic to New York, and then do a couple of tour cruises for the what are they called?
Like the sea trials or something like that? Or
No,
like,
but after the sea trials,
like
for
a
the
testing, like a
for
sea-
the agents, for the agents.
Okay, all right.
You know, so they would bring their people on and they would show the boat off,
and then they could sell it later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So we would be on board, just the crew, just the startup crew,
Right.
for the whole Atlantic trip. You know, which is about 14 days, all told, and I would have to do these projects, and I would have to get them done while I was working. There was one time where we were working on stuff at night in the main showroom editing, and then I had to shoot these videos during the day.
Okay.
And so my shooting schedule was like 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then 6 p.m. to like 6 a.m. So there was almost 72 hours where I didn't sleep.
Right. Right.
Because I worked all night editing, and then I got up and worked all day shooting, and then all editing, and then all shooting until I collapsed.
And how long did that go on for?
That was the trend for 4 years.
4 years.
Until I quit. But then I came back because it's a longer, bigger story of moving to Rochester and moving back and moving to Rochester and back and forth.
But afterwards,
chasing jobs.
But afterwards, when you went into another field of the similar thing, let's say you went into do some video, you would have memories of this.
Yeah.
And you would go, oh my God, I'm going to be like, how do I navigate the deadlines? And
it made me, unfortunately, I'm at my best when I'm at a ridiculous deadline and I'm under the gun and I'm never going to finish.
Yeah.
That's when I'm awesome. And I hate that because that's how I work now.
Yeah. Yeah. I see.
If I have a big edit coming up and it's due in 2 weeks, I'm finishing it up in the last 4 days.
Wow. Okay.
And then everyone's like, that's amazing. And I'm like, so I've been trying to work myself. I started going to therapy in 2017 when I figured out, when my therapist told me, you have PTSD.
Wow.
Because it changed the way I was as a person. It changed my interpersonal relationships with my wife and with other people and how I work in my profession. And so I've been, working for the last 5 years or so, trying to undo all those habits and undo that way of thinking.
As in putting yourself into a pressure box further into the deadline.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to, pace myself and get things done early and to do it now.
Yes.
Mantra.
And that's what people have to realize. Look, that's a perfect example of what this book can start dialogue for so many people. It's not just PTSD. There's so many. We all deal with it.
It's not battle only.
No, it's not
There's
battle.
different forms of battle.
There's definitely different forms of battle. I think it was Mike Currid of Eggertown Tour Company. He told me this. He said that there's not microaggressions. There's a term for it, but even if it's just 5 minutes, but that 5 minutes every day for 20 years, it builds up, and people do not realize what's happening until they're into it. And they go, why do I do that? Why did my hands shake and that's what's happening. And that's what I found that amazing because I think I have PTSD from the writing of the book.
But that's legit.
It is.
You put yourself in a very difficult pressure situation.
And in order to get results and to stay on target, because my hang up was always waiting until the last minute or just doing just enough. Okay, that's good. Let's see what we can do tomorrow. No. You keep going. And that's the whole thing, was to try to get these results. But that's what's amazing. I think that this came out to be something much more than a prequel to Jaws.
Yeah.
And I think you're realizing that with the reading.
Yeah. It totally works for what's going on in today's world. It's totally relatable in that way.
Yeah. Now we just got to get Steven Spielberg to read it.
Right. Steve, come on.
Yeah.
Maybe we should go through Tom Hanks. Maybe if Hanks got a hold of it.
Listen, there's avenues.
There's avenues. All right, good. I'm sure you've thought of them all. So what would you? Obviously, we know what the goal is here. Screenplay, movie, Ian Shaw. That whole amazing idea.
Yeah, that's out of my hands. That's going to be out of my hands.
Right.
So at that point, what was your question? Like, what is my goal for?
So what's next?
More writing. I can't wait to write more. I just can't wait.
You got the writing bug, huh?
I totally.
Now, are you going to stay? Are you going to stay in the Jaws world, or are you going to venture out into something else? Or are you not sure?
I know.
Oh, you're just going to keep it.
I can't say.
Hush.
I was told not to say too much. However,
okay,
we are. There's a lot of characters in Jaws, and there's a scene in Jaws. There's a hint in there when the two guys are on the dock with the holiday roast.
Yeah,
and the guy says, we got to do this fast. And he says, no. He goes, the chief lives on the other side of the island. So what that tells me is that there are other narratives going on Amity Island at the same time that Jaws takes place. What are those narratives, and can we explore those and lead those into the future, into the Amity Island? In Ghostbusters, he says, it's not the girl, Venkman, it's the building.
Right.
It's not the sharks, it's the island.
Right.
That's all I can say.
Okay. I love it.
Yeah. And it's going to be
it's a bigger story.
Got to lop off 3 and 4. Jaws 3 and 4 are going away.
Yeah, no.
But 1 and 2 are legit, and we're going to build on that.
And you know what? I'll say that Jaws 3 is it's one of my freakish little, what's the word I'm looking for?
Because we saw it as kids.
Yeah.
It's our guilty pleasure.
Thank you. Guilty pleasure.
We like that. Yes.
And, the cast is good. Mm-hmm. It's hokey as shit, but there's just parts of it that I love.
There are gems in there that are unbelievable. And in fact, I told someone who, when they see Joe Alves next, because Joe Alves was the set director, right? He was the guy that did all the Orca letters and stuff for Jaws. Mm-hmm. And then Jaws 2, I think he was second unit director. Well, he directed Jaws 3, okay? Now, whenever I see him, I'm going to tell him that scene with Overman in the water, when Overman's working on I've been underwater doing construction, I've been underwater doing welding, and when you're in low visibility and you're working down there and Overman turns around really fast and there's just like an eel swimming, he senses something, then he turns back. Then he turns around and then the shark gets him, right? That happens all the time when you're underwater. For me, I would just be working and I would look around.
Oh my God.
It was so, Jaws 3 got inside my head and it's still inside my head. So yes, that's the guilty pleasure. But as far as narratives go, we're not going to pretend that there was a monster shark at a SeaWorld, right? Or not. That's going to be, I can't explain that. You got to give me something, I can't explain that. And Jaws 4 definitely can't explain that. So, but Jaws 1 and 2, definitely the Book of Quint.
The best part of Jaws 4 was the flashbacks.
Yes. Yeah, because they were all taken from.
Yeah.
Well, there was one where it showed they got the one scene after Sean Brody is after the funeral. Or after Sean, and Michael Brody's coming in with his family. No, so before the funeral. So Michael Brody comes back, and they go to Ellen Brody's house, and they have Lee Fierro, and they have the other lady there, Mrs. Thompson there. They got the two actresses from Lee Fierro played Mrs. Kittner. So they got those two ladies from Jaws, and they're older now, and they put her with Ellen Brody. So that tells me that Mrs. Kittner made up with the Brodies and possibly became almost like a second grandmother or an aunt to the two boys.
Yeah.
Where she did not blame Martin for the death of Alex Kittner, but she became a family friend.
Right.
And I love that. There was like that one little moment in Jaws 4. I was like, why couldn't you have just done that? The whole movie, just done that. Because people would have respected that and they would have liked that because it would have been processing maybe Ellen's guilt and all that stuff. Or because, remember, in the Ella Brody effect of Jaws Obsession, on that episode, using clues in the movie, I have this whole theory that Ellen was the reason why Chief Brody moved out of New York City. That when he was saying that about, all the muggings and you have to walk the kids to school, that was Ellen.
Yeah.
Because he was a 20-year cop in New York City. He was a detective. So he could have been there, but it was her going, we got to get these kids safer. You got to take that chief's job out of Amity. You could do that. If you take early retirement, you're at 20 years. And he did that. So he moved over there. So really, the process of Jaws is all because of Ellen Brody. So if you watch Jaws, she's acting extremely guilty that watching her husband go through this. Yeah. She's observing him. Yeah. And look how she's like really almost like very motherly to him when he's going towards the orca. And she's saying, I packed your Dramamine and I put your extra glasses. I don't think Chief Brody's like a baby.
Right.
It's just that she's being overly because he's doing that for her because it was her idea to move to Amity.
I love how you pull this shit out of this movie, and I guarantee you they did not even know it was there.
No, they didn't.
They didn't even know it was there.
But
you're sifting through the sand and you're finding all these gems, and they're like, wow.
I love that. Yes.
That's the best part. That is the best. I'm serious. Listen to the Jaws Obsession. Even if you're just a moderate Jaws fan or think it was a good movie, you're going to be impressed by how Ryan and John Tedder, how they pull these things out of this movie, and like the whole Quint is a father figure and everything. I mean, it's just brilliant. It's just
that all materialized, and you have to realize that was from the writing of the book,
right?
I'm going through this, and then I'm just going, what if the Jaws community, what if the Jaws fans just allow me to throw out one little bit of information, just one information? Would it change everything that you think of? Because we're so enamored with the lore of making of Jaws that Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw didn't get along and they kind of butted heads. So when we see that, we think that's what's going on. So let's stop the making of Jaws. Let's go into the Jaws universe. What if I told you that Matt Hooper lost his dad at 16 years old to a boating accident and his dad got lost at sea? That little bit of information changes the entire dynamic. So in this book, we learned that from Matt Hooper. It's not a spoiler. We learned that from Matt Hooper. So therefore, now you can watch Jaws and you can realize what is happening there. It's this father-son dynamic. He's seeing a father figure in Quint, and there's a lot of mimicry going on, which is now foreshadowed by the Brody's and Sean Brody's scene of the mimicry going on. That's the foreshadowing of what Matt Hooper does later on with the crushing of the can, with all the different things. He's going to put the SDU-5E strobe light on the barrel. All these different things. While Quint puts the barrel in the shark, he's going to put something on the barrel. There's all these little things he's doing it's a mimicking of a father-like figure. And that whole thing explodes just off of one piece of information. And then when you ask me what else is there left, I'm going to surprise. I will reveal it to you on a future episode, but if I were to there's one more piece of information that I could plug in that would change the entire dynamic of what happens after Jaws. Yeah. But I have to put that little, I call it the Jurassic Park DNA theory. They have DNA, they need that DNA of the bullfrog to plug up the holes. So if I put these little pieces in, it leads to wonders.
I tell you what, you definitely inspire me. You make me want to jump back into all of these stories that I have knocking around in my head that I just have not been disciplined enough to write.
Okay.
You make me excited to try that. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Because, and if you just forward progress is everything, keep moving forward like a shark, little bit and all of a sudden it happens. So if you take a half hour a day, I'm a notoriously slow reader. But if I just read a chapter, 2 chapters a day, I'll get to the end of the book. And that's how we have to just look at life.
That's brilliant. Ryan Dacko, I really appreciate you coming in. JawsOB.com, the Book of Quint. bookofquint.com, I believe.
Bookofquint.com, jawsoapy.com. Yep, they go to the same place.
Yeah, and you'll just look into this stuff.
Yep.
Trust me, just look into this stuff. This is so far. I'm just a little bit past half. It is a great read. I've already alluded to it, but and you talked about in your research, you definitely have picked up a lot of the classic styles that I love. Melville, Hemingway, Fitzgerald. It's all there.
Thank you.
It's all there. So that is a masterful part of this whole process.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm honored that you came here. Hopefully we're going to do this again.
We're definitely going to do this again
at some point in the near future. And anything else you'd like to leave with today?
No, I was just everybody is just please have patience because the publishing world is notoriously slow.
Yes,
and we just need patience at this point. But I can guarantee you will have an opportunity to read the book. We just have to keep moving forward.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks again, man.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me on.
Yeah.